From Wish TV and the All Indiana Podcast Network, this is the Business, Equity, and Opportunities Podcast with Scott Sander.
Welcome to the Business, Equity, and Opportunities Podcast. I'm Scott Sander. Today's pod is an exclusive extended edition with extra information and conversation beyond what you saw in our Sunday morning broadcast. For the last 26 years, TechPoint has honored tech innovators and development leaders at the annual Mira Awards. It is an opportunity to salute the most innovative people and companies contributing to Indiana's tech ecosystem. We've selected the Resilience Award winner, Nida Ansari, to highlight as our success story.
Every business is unique and has a target audience. If you own or manage a business, Circulus Digital Media can help you connect and grow your customer base with turnkey digital solutions that are nimble, offering best-in-class results, service, and support to reach a bigger customer base, allowing you to pinpoint a specific audience down to the smallest details. Get outside the city, the state, span the globe. Put Circulus Digital Media to work for you. Get started now at circulusdigital.com. That's circulusdigital.com.
My name is Nida Ansari. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer of 16 Tech.
And you've just recently won an amazing Resilience Award from Mira. I want to talk about that first. What did it mean receiving that?
It was extremely unexpected, an honor. I was humbled. There were 16 other nominees who had stories equal to mine. Everybody's got one. I think it was validating to a degree to know that the judging panel and whomever heard my story heard it, right? So I think I said, the day I got it, I kind of said, I feel seen and I feel heard, and it's completely true. I think that's all what any of us wants. So at the basis of it, that's how I felt. To tell that story was really personal. And I mentioned earlier when we were talking that I haven't told that story before. I didn't tell that story at all. To a degree, I don't know if I felt like it wasn't relevant, but turns out that it is. It's a part and parcel of who I am. It's a huge part of my experience. It took me 19 years to become a citizen. So that's a large swath of my life. It predicated what jobs I took. It predicated where I lived. So in no small way, it also predicated whether or not I kept the job, because if I didn't, I would have had to go back home to Pakistan, where I had never meaningfully lived. So it means a lot to hear from the tech community that my story was important, and ultimately the impact and the role I play in the tech ecosystem is seen.
Your story also takes place over the span of a few very troubling years here.
Yes.
I'm going to talk a little bit about that journey, to what degree, and how that relationship of what was going on in the world and what you had to overcome to become where you are now.
So not in the plan. We moved here February 2001, which was 6-7 months before 9/11. We moved here with a different plan in mind. At the time, you could become a citizen within a few years of having jobs and being productive members of the community. We also moved as a Pakistani family from the Middle East to right outside of DC. And so when 9/11 happened, I'm 7 months in, I don't know what's happening. I hear and see it on the news, but I meaningfully don't know how it's going to affect our lives. We got to a point where you heard about it. We had neighbors across the street who had their home raided. The Patriot Act changed a lot of things for us. It changed my immigration path. I ultimately then ended up becoming an international student at a private school in Southwest Virginia called Roanoke College. Academically, my plan didn't change. I was a chemistry major, but I found myself in rooms talking about things that I didn't expect to be talking about. All I wanted to do was, I was here to go to school and get a job and do normal things. And I was being asked to represent myself in a way that I didn't know how. So I had an identity thrust on me in a way that I didn't ask for, but I also didn't know how to wear. And I think that's part of the reason why I haven't talked about it until recently, because I didn't when you're an immigrant in that way, you kind of are coming here for a different life. And when you come here, you're like, all right, I'm here, let's go. You roll your sleeves up and you work. But when unexpectedly you're put into a room and asked to represent, or asked to lay low, or asked to be less or more of something that you didn't know you were to begin with, that becomes a different conversation. That becomes a formative period in your life in a way that no one asks for. Now, I moved here and I'm now college educated multiple times over, right? Immigrant, there are folks here that don't have that benefit. There are people here that are specifically in Indianapolis. We have a large refugee community here. That informs a lot of what I do outside of work. I'm on the board of the Immigrant Welcome Center. We're doing our biggest fundraisers coming up on April 17th called Live Local, Think Global. We hope our community comes out to kind of share stories and hear about immigrants and refugees that are in the Indianapolis community making meaningful difference to the Indianapolis community. A lot of immigrants and a lot of refugees, in fact, pay taxes and are economically viable members of this community in a way that we don't always appreciate. So we're hoping to highlight that in a bigger way. But as a college-educated immigrant, it clearly puts me in a different bracket, one that I'm very, very fortunate to be in. So when I think about it and put it in perspective that way, there's worse stories out there. It did take me 19 years to become a citizen. My brother still isn't one. So even within my core nuclear family, we're in different places. So that's not something I can shut my eyes and not think about. But having to talk about it feels different.
I'm sure talking about it, though, for a lot of other people, they can't imagine what it was like through those years, but what you learned in that journey that you're now sharing, how vitally important that is right now. I mean, you're in a position to change other people's lives for the good just by them hearing your story. What does that make you feel?
It's a big responsibility, one that I didn't know I was taking on, but I'm very grateful for it. I think it's a huge blessing that I'm here today, that it's a huge blessing you and I are talking. And I hope that if it gives anybody any appreciation for what immigrants go through, that's one thing. If it gives other immigrants an opportunity to think about light at the end of the tunnel, that's another thing. I'm happy to talk to anyone that comes in. I didn't used to be as open about it. But if someone wants to talk to me about this current environment and share how they're feeling, commiserate, think about plans, what their options are, I'm happy to talk to them. When we make it through a tough situation, we can choose to take on the responsibility or it can be thrust upon us, but it is one where if you can look back and help somebody else out, that's the best thing you can do with it. I'm not the only one. There's resources here. There's formal and informal resources here. So if there are immigrants that listen to this that want to talk about their options, I'm happy to talk to them. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, we had a lunch here at 16 Tech, and somebody came up to me afterwards after I shared a very short snippet of my story and shared that she was in a boat where she had a different immigration status than her husband, and I pointed her to the Immigrant Welcome Center as a potential source of information, as a potential source of resources, legal advice, things like that. So.
Do you think that a lot of what you've learned and a lot of what you pass on when you're looking at an entrepreneur or a small business person that has hopes and dreams, that this is the kind of thing, no matter what their journey has been, you're right, everybody has a story, right? But to take the strength that it took for you and the things that you learned, I mean, I think strength is important, but I think you also probably used a little of that intuition of knowing when a door is opened, how to take advantage of a situation, how to learn from the situation. I can only imagine you're like a sponge, always learning and learning about things. But I think, don't you think that has maybe prepared you to become the businesswoman that you are now?
It definitely has. So when you're in a situation where you feel like you have no options, just to creak in the door feels like an opportunity. So it's not even the door's wide open. It's someone's just unlocked it and waiting for you to open it. So I've gotten to a place where if I have something to ask somebody, I'll ask it, because a question unasked will always go unanswered, and it'll always be a no. So you have to kind of make the opportunities come your way. You have to take advantage of them, and your timing won't always work out. So it takes work, and I'm not always the best at it, but you also have to be very used to the no. As a woman, as a minority, as a Muslim, there's a lot of identities and hats that we wear that make no a very likely outcome of life. So turning something into an opportunity is about perspective. Sometimes there are things I couldn't do about my situation, and at some point that just leads to the ability of reframing as a survival mechanism, where you're just saying, this is my situation right now. This isn't me forever. And if it's me right now, then I learn to live with it. I learn to make the best of it. I learn to learn from it. So the opportunities that I have been given sometimes feel like luck. A lot of times feel like luck. But if I wasn't in the room asking what I needed to ask, or if I wasn't making friends with the people that I made friends with, or if I wasn't networking when I needed to be networking, I wouldn't be here. I didn't come by this on my own. No one does. But knowing and getting to know the right people, making yourself open to. I think there's a lot when it comes to body language, and there's a lot when it comes to being open to a conversation about culture, about politics, about immigration policies, about life in general, that as long as you're open to it, people feel it. It's more an energy thing than anything else. So when you're open to the opportunity, the abundance kind of comes your way. It feels a little karmic in that nature, but that's how I believe it happens, because not everything, you can't orchestrate or control everything.
So let's segue into the idea of the business that you're in that connects with helping people access capital, and how you got into that path and what you do. I know you spoke a little bit about what you're recommending, how the
Sure.
You're not just handing people things. They have to work for it, right?
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about that part of an entrepreneur and the small business owners. One of the hardest things anyone has is trying to ask for the money, trying to get the money they have to make that idea happen. What do you advise people, and how do you interact with that?
So when you're an entrepreneur, you have more asks than you have gives, which means you're always looking for something, whether it's talent, whether it's capital, customers, investors, whatever it is. I love working with entrepreneurs. I love working next to them, with them, for them. And I'm not quite sure where the passion comes from, other than I like helping people. But when I think about entrepreneurship, in entrepreneurship, you're successful based on who you know, how many of them you know, and how often you're out there knowing or getting to know them. So when it comes to building networks, so I help entrepreneurs build networks. I help entrepreneurs with storytelling, with the objective of raising capital. So in order to get access to capital, you have to tell a good story. And a story isn't fiction. A short story is fact around what the potential of your business is. So I help entrepreneurs do that better. That includes body language, that includes advice on decks, pitching, practice, all of that. And when that comes together in a confluence of all the things, including what that entrepreneur is building, because I'm not building what the entrepreneur is building. No one knows the business better than that entrepreneur. And once they have that confidence to tell their story in a way that makes meaningful sense to the receiver, whether it's an investor or a customer, they're much more likely to be successful. Now, if they're in front of that investor in a way that that investor knows what they're already building, there's a little bit of priming that happens prior to the formal pitch. They are more likely to be successful. So I help them with all of that. I'll help entrepreneurs with all of that. Now, I have a soft spot for entrepreneurs that are undercapitalized, first-time founders, Black and brown, immigrant, veteran, rural, what have you. And the reason for that is it's no different than being being a first generation college student. There's a lot of things you just don't know. And so when you're doing that as an entrepreneur that's never built a company before, there are basic things that, it's like playing a game that everybody else has played before and you're just learning the rules. And if somebody can help you with the rules a little bit, you're more likely to be successful. Now, at the end of the day, you'll stand on your own merit. But if I can help grease that in any way that allows their product, their team to shine, I'm going to do that. So that comes as a result of my mentoring several Techstars programs, one in Detroit. I was on the selection committee for one in Alabama. I helped the G-Beta programs here in the 16 Tech building. And I mentor founders informally. Small businesses have similar access to capital is harder. They're not going after venture. We talk about venture-backed companies a lot, and it's sexier to talk about venture-backed companies. With this new administration in Indiana, we're focusing on small business, and a lot of small businesses are responsible for the economic development numbers we have in the state. So when you're a first-time business owner, there's a lot of things you don't know. So as an immigrant, I come from, a parents or a dad that always worked a job. And so when I had to tell my mom that I'm not going to be working a full-time job in the same way anymore, that was a paradigm shift for her. So multiply that times all the other immigrants in the community or all the other first-time founders in the community. It's a scary space to be in. You don't know if you'll have health insurance. As a single mom, you may not know if you have daycare available to you. You may not know whether you can work nights and weekends only or during the day, around school schedules. There's a lot of things you don't know and can't do. And when it comes to access capital, you may only be able to access capital if you put your house up as collateral. If you don't have a house, what do you do? A lot of times you get loans only most of the times you get loans only if you've been in business a certain period of time. So viability of the business solely depends on whether or not you can make it that far. And you can make it that far if you have capital to begin with. So it's kind of one of those cycles that begets itself, where if you don't have wealth to begin with, how are you supposed to generate wealth? And so if we can't have those conversations openly about the ideas, about what makes businesses successful, the watch outs, we're not, I like to say that politeness is not kindness. So if somebody came to me and said, hey, I'm going to work on this idea, and I happen to know for a fact that there are some things they should watch out for, if I just simply pat them on the back and say, great job, nice job, sounds great, good for you, and send them on their way, I've not done the kindness to them. I've effectively, actually at that point, I'd probably say I've been a part of their downfall if they end up failing, because I knew and I didn't say anything. So that's kind of how I feel about the entrepreneurship and how to build and how to access resources. Capital is land, labor, and resources, right? So that could be property, that could be talent. There's a lot of programs in the state that are beneficial for entrepreneurs, but they can't access them if they don't know about them. So simply being aware of what's out there is a big deal here. I think the IDC has done a fantastic job making these resources a lot more available and making small businesses aware of the options that are available to them. Bootstrapping is one thing, but taking advantage of resources is another.
What do you think about the idea that it's okay to fail? Don't be afraid of it, because you learn from it.
Yeah. So fail fast is a big deal. I think if failing should be okay, failing should be celebrated in a way that as long as you learn something, that's great. It could be for yourself, it could be for the company, it can be for the ecosystem, but failing should be okay. Failing should prompt support from the community. failing fast means that you had the courage. It's not easy to start a business that nobody else has done before, or to start a business that no one in your family has done before. It's not easy to start something. And so that courage that it took, if it's condemned when I fail, I'm not going to drum up the courage to do it again. And that's a failure on the community's part. So if we can celebrate failure in a way that, you kind of get people together and say, what did you learn from it? How can we do this differently next time? Instead of allowing businesses to stick around. I call them zombie businesses, right? They're just subsisting on the bare minimum instead of, hey, I should probably shutter these doors, forget about what the community is going to say, how everybody's going to feel. This is something I need to do, and be straight with you, and then kind of build again. I think that carries more stock and more weight than just subsisting. So failure is important. Failure is a strong part of life. Is a strength building, resilience building phase. I failed a lot. So if you look at what millennials have been through so far, we've seen multiple recessions, some of the biggest since the Great Depression. We've seen 9/11. We've seen COVID shut things down in a way that hasn't happened before. We've also seen the first Black president. We've seen a lot of changes in a way that created uncertainty. And so if you take COVID as a single example, we've seen this before. We've done this before. We're here because in spite of what has happened before. I think that attitude of this too shall pass is harder to wrap your mind around if you haven't seen it before and you're relying purely on leaps of faith. Faith is hard. But if you're in a position where your business survived or your business failed because you've done that before, and now you get to do it again. And it's the get to do it again, not the have to do it again or should do it again or must do it again. It's the you get to do it again and see what it's like. That's the whole point of life, is you don't know how things are going to end up. But if you've got a pivot point to point two, like COVID, I think you're in a much better position than if you didn't. So in a lot of ways, that feels like I'm talking about a blessing in disguise. For a lot of people, it might have been. For a lot of people, it wasn't. It was horrible. I was in Atlanta. My family was in Virginia. I didn't get to see them for months and months at a time. I created my own little bubble, and anytime I ventured out of it, somebody got sick. So I kind of just stuck to myself for a really long time in Atlanta. And it was isolating for a lot of people. There were people that lost loved ones. Businesses failed. But it was a great time for innovation. It was a great time for people to try new technologies. We had a lot of tech companies that I know of that pivoted to contact tracing from being just like lock and security companies. We had a lot of companies that pivoted from security to just being surveillance, for safety, for health. We had janitorial companies. So your safe humdrum companies like janitorial services, blew up during that time, or bleach products. I mean, there's a number of businesses that did really well, but there's always going to be attrition. And I think that's why COVID feels like a proof point of attrition, because there was so much, proverbial deaths that happened, right, in the form of multiple businesses that failed. But now you know what not to try or what to do differently. I think that's power in that.
I've had people tell me in some of the technologies, the restaurant business, for example, we probably would have gotten there, but it forced people to advance technologies like tinters.
Yes.
Yeah. Get it done now because we have to.
Yeah.
And sort of kind of push that envelope a little.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah, when COVID happened, I was working for a company where we facilitated brainstorming sessions among disparate departments, and they often had to come together in person to do so. But when we started working with global companies, we had to pivot to doing them virtually. And so fortunately, by the time COVID hit, we had already started onboarding a plan to do these brainstorming sessions, facilitation sessions, design sprints completely virtually. So we were a little bit ahead of the game. At the time, I also worked for a European company. So they shut down a couple weeks before us. And so when that happened, we were leaps and bounds ahead of our peers when it came to implementing technology that otherwise would not have been available. Now, it really, I think, tried and tested parents and teachers to a really different degree, where you had to make sure that kids were still paying attention from home and learning what they needed to learn, and teachers who had taught the same lesson plan for a long, long time had to pivot to delivering it online. That didn't come certainly without its challenges, but it forced us to embrace technology in a way that at a rate that we might not have had COVID not happened. Now, it has completely different implications for the going back to work and going back to the office, and then global travel. It's impacted that quite a bit. So long term, I think we're going to continue seeing changes, but they're not all bad. They're not all good, but they're not all bad.
You were sharing with me, and one of the things we bring up a lot of times in the Running Your Business segment is how important it is to get out, to be a part of the community. Yeah. And it's also good business.
Yes.
Because you meet people and you sit on several boards. And can you kind of give your philosophy of how important it is for people to get out there, meet the community, give back to the community? You're doing good, but you're also, it's a way of networking and finding out and taking advantage of that. Can you chat?
Yeah. So being involved in the community was, I like to say that it's very selfish, right? For me, I started doing it because I needed to get out more. I needed to meet people that were outside of my profession. I just wanted a little bit more variety in my life. So when I started in Atlanta, I started by showing up to meal packing events once a month. And I just did that for years. And I got to a point where I was helping to organize them. And I was, so when I moved here, 2 weeks after I moved in 2021, IndieVolved is one of the events that I went to. It's put on by Indie Hub. It was at Victory Field for a number of years. It was at the State Fair grounds this past year. So I went to it, and I went with a couple goals in mind. And I was like, I want to get involved in more entrepreneurial related activity. I'm passionate about food insecurity, and I'm passionate about immigrant and refugee issues and causes. So the organizations that I was involved in Atlanta didn't exist here. And so I went to this thing, fantastic event, walked around, learned a lot, and ended up at the board of the Speakeasy. I ended up getting involved, ultimately ended up in the boards of these organizations, but ended up meeting the Speakeasy, the Immigrant Welcome Center, and Pack Away Hunger, and all three of which I ended up on the board of. And so, and quite candidly, my social circle also became that, right? So that's how I met friends. That's how we celebrate birthdays together. We celebrate weddings. We celebrate job gains, losses, all the things with this group. And so that actually became the starting point for my social network after I moved to a state where I knew nobody. And so that's kind of the story of how it happened. Now, when it comes to why community engagement's important, nothing happens like in isolation, whether it's a single person or a single organization. There's no one thing that comes together, and that's why we call it an ecosystem. An ecosystem is one that sustains itself. You could create an herbarium, put a bunch of plants that are symbiotic with each other into a completely closed system, and it'll sustain itself. And that's what an ecosystem is. So, but if you put a plant by itself into a closed pot, it's not going to survive. So none of us survive on their own or on our own. So giving back makes you feel better. I think it begets abundance to you. In going back to the energy type of conversation, whatever you give away comes back to you in some way, shape, or form eventually. It's just good to put out there. It feels good to help people. And so when I think about, I'm going to the Indiana Hunger Summit on Thursday, put on by Corteva and a number of other organizations, Agri Institute and others, to learn a little bit more about hunger in Indiana. I went to the Hunger and Health Summit put on by the IBJ, breakfast put on by the IBJ a couple weeks ago. At the end of the day, Indiana's 92 million meals short every year. 1 in 7 of us does not know where their next meal is coming from. And I say us because there are people in Carmel, in downtown Indiana, that don't know where their next meal is coming from. I spoke with university students that say at the beginning of every semester they have to make their choice between food and textbooks. that is an unfortunate choice to have to make. It's not a distribution conversation. It's not a lack of food conversation. It's a distribution conversation. It's not getting to the people that need it in the way that they need it. So where would we be if we didn't have community? If my neighbors were struggling to put food on the table for their children, what kind of human would I be? It's more vindicating about me as a person than it is about them if I did nothing. It's more social responsibility. It's more obligation. It's more, you can put it in whatever bucket you want. It might be, it scratches an itch for somebody that likes to help people. Some people do it because it's a tax write-off. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. But I think giving back to the community is something that it was instilled in me as a person growing up too. It's part and parcel of Islam. It's part and parcel of, what my parents did growing up, what my brother does. So we just do it, right? And if you don't have to think twice about it. It doesn't have to be a big deal. You don't have to talk about it. You don't have to. It's not a transaction. It's just it's one way, right?
How great it would be if every business literally built that into their business plan.
Yeah, that's the hope, right? So when I bring entrepreneurs together, entrepreneurship lives and dies on who you know. And so when I put together networking events, I do it around community service. So if we're putting an event together and it's $25 to attend, you can bring a few cans of food in to subsidize the $25 entrance fee. Or we can do a networking event over meal packing, and you get to know somebody while you meal pack instead of making eye contact with someone for 30 seconds and hoping to find someone more important in the room as your next conversation. So it changes the conversation in a way that levels the playing field. It at minimum leaves you feeling good about making an impact in the ecosystem. We can send the meals wherever you want. We can have them be clothing drives. We can have them be hygiene kits, STEM kits. It really doesn't matter as long as there's a community impact story to be told afterwards. So afterwards, I'll do a report on the network impact, who met whom, what were the stories, did you meet a board member, did you meet a podcast guest, did you meet a marketing designer, like who did you meet? And I'll also do a community impact report on where did the meals go, who did they go to, how many volunteers did we bring together, and for how many hours. And so that my last meal pack was June of last year. One's coming up on May 11th. We did it at the former Speakeasy. It was a Sunday morning, and 50 people were lined up at the door at 10 a.m. on a Sunday morning to volunteer their time. So in the course of several hours, we packed 21,000 meals that went to food insecure Hoosiers. And so with the help of groups like the Orr Fellowship that showed up, 16 tech members showed up, machine members showed up. There were a bunch of venture vets showed up, Helping Veterans and Families showed up. There were a number of organizations represented. Immigrant Welcome Center was there. They all got to know each other in a way that they don't often have the opportunity to do. And it was good, wholesome time because your families are also invited. This is a great time to bring young kids. They get to see their parents work for the benefit of the community while they get to know each other. And a lot of that stuff you can't measure immediately. So my networking reports actually come out months and months later because you can't measure that impact right there. I can tell you how many people probably met other people. I know there were a dozen entrepreneurs and companies there. I know there were a dozen entrepreneurial service organizations there and about a dozen support organizations there. But what meaningful connections they made, those stories come a lot later. And so I'm excited about to have the opportunity to build that and continue building it.
But where you are in your life right now, what brings the most joy, personal joy to your heart?
That's a tough question. Helping people and connecting them to resources they need. So that could be putting the meal packs together, that can be connecting an entrepreneur to an investor, or I connected an entrepreneur in the Bay Area recently to a lawyer here in Indiana, and they're going to help them through a bunch of legal paperwork and all that stuff. It can be We found a Guatemalan passport on the street in the city a few weeks ago. We didn't know where to take it, and so we reached out to the Immigrant Welcome Center, and they were able to give us formal guidance on what to do with it. That felt gratifying because it was a closed loop. But yeah, in general, I think it's understanding that we can make a difference in small and big ways, and that connection is extremely important to be able to do that, right? So the fact that I have somebody to call when we find a Guatemalan passport, it's such a niche situation. We were able to help that person out, hopefully, right? Lots of stories that I can't directly point to, but that as my having anything to do with it, but that ripple effect, that butterfly effect, it extends pretty far and wide when we think about geographies. If I'm able to pack a meal here that eventually gets distributed to somebody in South Sudan, the fact that I've helped in any measurable way, whether it's like putting a grain of rice into a bag, been able to put food on the table for a family in South Sudan or Yemen or Pakistan, there's nothing better, honestly.
Our thanks again to all the contributors who joined us for this episode of the Business Equity and Opportunities podcast. We hope you found it enlightening, useful, and inspiring. You'll find more information about the show on our website, beoshow.com. You can watch Business Equity and Opportunities Sunday mornings at 10 on Wish TV or live stream it through wishtv.com. Each week we provide 7 full segments with topics ranging from how to get started and how to access capital to the day-to-day running of your business and questions about accounting and bookkeeping. We feature business news and trends and always share a success story from one of our contributors. Join us next time for more insights into the world of small business. Be sure to sign up for our Business Equity and Opportunities newsletter to get even more valuable, up-to-date information. And if you have any questions or you'd like to be part of our show, please email us. The address is beo@wishtv.com. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Scott Sander. Thanks for listening.
Watch the Business Equity and Opportunity Show on Wish TV and access all of our content and share it on demand anytime at beoshow.com. You can find more podcasts from Wish TV on the All Indiana Podcast Network at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.